The field is wet with more than rain. It is heavy with history thick, invisible, waiting to be written. Mist hangs low across the grass at Runnymede, coiling around boots and banners, softening every sound except the slow, deliberate thud of horse hooves pressing into sodden earth. The reeds along the river bend and tremble, their green blades whispering secrets only the wind can hear. Above, a raven circles. Its cry is sharp, but quickly lost in the hush that blankets the plain. As if even nature dares not speak too loudly in this hour. At the heart of the gathering stands a man who wears a crown but no peace. King John. His eyes are rimmed with red. Not from weeping, he has no tears left, but from sleepless nights of plotting and rage. Rain has dulled the blue of his royal cloak, weighing it down like regret. Around him, the barons stand tall, armor creaking, swords sheathed but spirits sharp. Their silence is louder than any rebellion. Each of them has ridden far, not for glory, not for plunder, but to demand something strange and dangerous, a promise. Between them, laid across a simple wooden table, lies the Magna Carta. It is not gold. It bears no seal of divinity. Just a parchment, creased and damp at the edges, its black ink still damp in places. But every line holds thunder. Every clause is a crack in the walls of absolute power. The king looks down at it. A piece of paper. And yet it cages him more than chains ever could. He does not reach for the quill. Not yet. Around him, the barons do not cheer. They do not plead. They wait like wolves beneath a full moon, patient but ready. These are not men given to poetry. They are scarred by battle, worn by years of war in France and Wales, bled by taxes and betrayal. But this moment is not war. It is something colder. It is the edge of change. The wind shifts. Banners ripple, lions of the crown, crosses of the church, each twitching like restless spirits. Even the horses grow uneasy, hooves shuffling, steam rising from their backs in the cold. Somewhere nearby, beneath a canvas tent, a clerk bends over his task. His hands are ink-stained, his back aches, but his focus does not waver. Dip, scratch, dip again. He copies the words as they are dictated, though none of them belong to him. His name will not be carved in stone. His bones will vanish into the soil like all the others, but the words will remain. He does not know he is shaping the language of resistance. He does not know that one day, others will read his lines in far-off lands, beneath new flags, in courts that do not yet exist. All he knows is this: ink must dry. King lifts the quill. His hand trembles not with fear, but fury held too long. He is not yielding. He is cornered. He is buying time. He is signing not for peace, but delay. Still he signs. The quill scratches. The ink stains. A king bends to parchment, not for justice, not for love of liberty, but because he must. Around him, no one moves. The barons do not smile. The rain still falls. The raven still circles, but something ancient cracks. A silence breaks, because here, on this wet field, power has shifted, not seized by sword or sermon, but shaped by ink. And though the king believes he can undo it, that he can burn it, bury it, forget it, the truth is already loose. The idea is breathing. A king may forget, but paper remembers. And so, in the damp wind, beneath the gray sky, as the clerk finishes the final copy and folds it carefully like a prayer, the future begins to stir. Not in thunder, not on fire, but in words whispered on wet parchment. And far across the channel, in a quiet monastery, a monk dips his quill too, preparing to translate these strange English demands into Latin. He doesn't yet know that his hands, too, are shaking history. The ink has not yet dried, but it will. The hooves are gone now, only the quiet remains. Inside a small chapel near Windsor, the air sits heavy with old breath and slow-burning incense. Stone walls rise around the space like the inside of a tomb, cold, pious, and still. Wind sighs at the narrow window slits but never enters. The light is scarce. Just a trembling flame on a single candle stub, casting shadows that dance like ghosts across timber-brick beams stained with centuries of silence. A monk kneels before a worn table. His robes are thin against the chill. His knees ache from hours of stillness, but he does not shift. Only his fingers move, scratching pen to parchment, ink to vellum, word to word. Like a man stitching an invisible wound he does not understand. The Latin flows, not as thought, but as rhythm. He does not pause to interpret the meaning. His mind is not meant to question. He is a vessel obedient, uncurious. But tonight, something feels different. A weight presses between the words. A sense that this text is not merely scripture, nor law. It is something unsettled, something new, something that dares touch the hem of kingship. He pauses. His breath escapes in a pale cloud, vanishing before it reaches the candlelight. Outside, the world is simpler. Peasants huddle near cookfires, their hands outstretched to the orange glow, their bellies grumbling from small meals and long winters. They do not know of the parchment being sealed within these chapel walls. They do not care about clauses or charters. Their lives are ruled by land. By cold. By the back-breaking rhythm of the fields and the distant voice of a lord. Yet the ink on this page will one day touch them. Not today, not tomorrow, but in time. Through sermons whispered in church, NAV, through rumors traded in marketplaces. Through the strange, slow pulse of change. The monk presses his seal into the still warm wax. The red circle pools and hardens, catching the light for a brief second before becoming just another stamp. Among many. He does not smile. He does not weep. But he lowers his head and mutters a prayer, not for his soul, but for something beyond himself, something still unseen. He speaks softly to the silence. Fiat voluntas tua. Let thy be done. The air smells of parchment and aging wood, of smoke that clings to robes and never fades, of devotion long since stripped of fire, now only ash and duty. In that quiet, something shifts, not loudly, not like a trumpet nor a sword, but like a tremor beneath still waters. An idea, planted in wax and ink, begins its slow crawl through time. King has been checked. A seal has been pressed. And though the chapel will be forgotten, though the monk's name will not endure, the page he holds may outlast them all. Because history does not only move in battles or blood. Sometimes it moves in the hush of candlelight. In the sore hands of a nameless scribe. In the unseen moment when a page is turned, and the old world begins to fray at the edges. Beyond the walls, a dog howls once, then stops. The fire outside crackles low. A child stirs in her sleep, clutching a piece of bread in her fist. And within the chapel, the candle flutters, then steadies. The monk dips his pen again. There are more copies to make, more truths to transcribe, because someday, perhaps long after he has turned to dust, someone will read what he has written and know that even kings must kneel to something. Scratches the next line into the VELLUM. The ink dries slowly, but it will dry. The stone walls of Westminster breathe a silence thick with centuries. This is no battlefield, but a place of quiet war fought, not with blades, but with ink, oaths, and parchment. The air inside the hall is stale with damp and dust, and yet something stirs beneath it. Something colder than stone, yet more enduring than steel. Here, in this great echoing chamber, the shape of power begins to shift. Candles flicker in the gloom, casting long shadows across wooden benches and tiled floors, worn thin by footsteps long forgotten. The judges' coats are dark, like mourning robes. Their voices are low, nearly whispers, but the weight they carry is immense. They speak in terms both sharp and strange: scutage, liberties, writs, and wards. The Magna Carta lays open before them, not as scripture, but as scaffold. They build with words now. They measure justice in lines and seals, in margins scratched with quills still dripping black. Each debate leaves a faint scar on the parchment. Each pause holds more than breath. It holds the past, struggling to release its grip. And slowly, word by word, judgment begins to separate from the crown. Not fully, not yet, but the idea. The idea is alive. Below, in a stone chamber crusted with cold and mildew, a merchant sits with shackles biting into his wrists. The rusted iron chain clinks when he shifts. His clothes are torn, his face unshaved. He stares through narrow bars at a wall that does not move. A guard chews loudly on hard bread just beyond reach, indifferent to the hunger behind the door. Merchant was seized without warning, without reason, without trial. Such things were common, but not forever. He doesn't know it yet. How could he? But miles above his head, in a hall he's never seen, a sentence is being drafted that may one day undo the chains around his body. Not now. Perhaps not even in his lifetime. But the scratch of quill upon vellum has begun, and somewhere within, those slow words, the rights of the nameless, begin to breathe. Back in the hall, the oldest judge lifts his hand. A seal is pressed into wax-hot red, silent. It binds more than ink. It binds memory. And memory, when carved into law, becomes something almost immortal. The sound of the stamp echoes off the beams like a slow bell toll. The men do not cheer. They do not smile. This is not victory. Not yet. But they know what they've done. They have drawn a line, not against kings, not against crowns, but for something. For a future not ruled by wrath or whim, but by words that even rulers must obey. The beams groan above them. A draft slinks through the cracks in the stone. The fire dies a little in the hearth, but the light does not vanish. It lingers small, soft, stubborn, like the law itself, still too young to defend, but no longer unborn. Back in the cell, the merchant closes his eyes. Hunger tightens in his gut like a rope. He whispers to no one, not even God. Just words, forgotten once they form, but far above. Someone remembers. Someone wrote them down, and soon, someone will read them again. Because law, true law, does not roar like a lion. It grows like moss, like ivy, quiet, persistent, and unstoppable. And though the crown still glitters on high thrones, it now glitters with a question beneath it. Who decides? The parchment curls slightly at its edge. The wax cools. The judge raises his hand again, already reaching for the next case. And outside, across muddy roads and hidden villages, the wind begins to carry a new scent. Not yet freedom, but the idea of it. A cracked bell cries into the morning mist, its voice warped by rust and rain. It tolls not for death nor prayer, but for waking, the kind of waking that stirs the body before the soul. A boy opens his eyes beneath a thatched roof, slick with damp, listening to the wind slip through the chinks in the wattle. His blanket is coarse wool, heavy with the night's cold. Beside the hearth, no fire burns. Only embers, pale and tired. Rain beats steady on the rooftops outside, drumming against wood and straw like the fingers of some unseen god. The boy pulls his tunic over his shoulders and steps down into the mud-packed floor, feet meeting cold earth. The smell of wet hay and dung rises sharp in his nose. His father is already awake, a man of thick hands and hollow eyes. A reeve appointed to manage the land for the Lord, yet living no better than those he answers to. He mutters beneath his breath as he fastens the cracked leather belt at his waist, speaking to no one in particular. Rents again. Always the rent, and that cursed tithe. His voice is tired, worn like the soles of his boots. Outside, the village blurs gray. Puddles ripple with every step. Chickens roost high, their feathers puffed against the chill. Smoke from early fires drifts low, clinging to the sodden thatch like ghosts that refuse to rise. And through it all, something walks with them. Not seen, not named, but I felt. A whisper that has crossed moats and halls to reach even here. The Magna Carta. The boy has heard of it, though not from scrolls or court. Only from the priest, whose voice softens when he speaks its name, as if afraid it might vanish if spoken. Too loud. It is not real to the villagers. Not yet. It is a story of barons and kings, swords and seals, far from the dung and hunger of their world. And yet, something begins to move. The lord who once thundered through their hamlet on horseback now comes less often. He rides with fewer men. He listens more. He watches the eyes of his peasants. He smells their growing courage. Today, the boy follows his father down the path to the chapel. The mud clings to their boots like it wants to keep them. The wind pulls at their cloaks. The sky has not brightened since dawn. The bell tolls again lonely, unsure. Inside the chapel, the air is warmer, thick with candle smoke and the sour sweetness of incense. The priest kneels before the altar, his fingers resting lightly on a worn cross. He rises as the reeve enters, scroll in hand, eyes lowered. The father does not speak loudly. He is not a bold man. But he speaks. "This tithe is unjust," he says. "It was doubled without cause." The priest takes the scroll, unrolls it with slow fingers. He reads. He nods. There is no shouting, no rebellion, no torch lit in the night. Only this, a man asking for fairness in a room of stone and silence. The boy watches, wide-eyed from the doorway. He does not understand the laws. He does not know the clauses or the Latin, but he knows what it means when a father kneels not in fear, but in protest. Something has changed. Not hunger, not the mud, but something quieter. The wind moans outside, pressing against the wooden walls. The chapel door creaks shut behind them, closing with a sound like finality. And yet, something feels open. The boy looks up at the altar, at the wooden cross carved with care, worn smooth by prayers whispered through generations. He wonders, not for the first time, if anyone hears those prayers, if the Lord's or even God listen, if they ever did. But today a question was asked, not by a priest, not by a knight, by a man of the field. And the question remained in the air, unanswered but not ignored. This is what Magna Carta has done. Not with thunder, not with swords, but with the idea that chains can be questioned, that law can be heard, that even the lowliest voice, if spoken carefully, might someday echo upward. The boy steps into the rain again. The mud is the same. But his footsteps feel different. And somewhere beyond the hills, where castles loom and banners wave, the great wheels of power begin slowly, so slowly to hear the creak of something new. Not revolution, but reckoning. The snow falls in silence, a quiet reckoning from the sky. It clings to the stone walls of the manor, to the bare branches of the orchard, to the shuttered windows that hold back both wind and history. In the stillness of a dimly lit solar, firelight flickers against tapestries older than memory. Shadows rise and fall along the carved beams above, dancing like ghosts uninvited. At a narrow desk beside the hearth, a woman writes. Her quill scratches gently over parchment, its strokes deliberate, though her hand trembles. The ink glistens wet and black beneath candlelight, thick with iron. Her breath is shallow, lips pressed tight, eyes rimmed red not from the cold, but from smoke and sorrow. Her husband lies in foreign soil, lost to a border war she never understood. His sword was pledged to a banner. His death was sent by a raven. And now, in the absence of his body, the law declares that the estate, her home, her child's inheritance, will pass to a cousin she has never met. A man, a stranger, a shadow. Not to her. She knows the Magna Carta. She has heard its promises, that a widow shall not be forced to remarry, that her rights must be honored, that justice must be done. The words echo in sermons and whispers, but promises do not till fields. They do not keep wolves from doors. And parchment signed in Runnymede feels a world away when a steward arrives with new orders and new seals. Still, She writes. Not for vengeance, not even for certainty, but because silence has become too heavy to bear. Each word she lays down is a stone against the tide. She writes her name, her lineage, her plea for justice. Her breath clouds in the cold between lines, and her fingers ache from the chill. But she does not stop. Behind her, near the corner of the room, a young servant girl watches. Her hands are folded, her feet bare against the freezing flagstones. She has served this lady since she could walk, fetching wood, warming milk, brushing. Out hair now gone silver at the ends. Tonight she sees something different in her mistress. Not grief, not a weakness, but a quiet defiance. A still burning flame. The noble woman leans back, staring at her words as if they might vanish in the morning light. Smoke curls upward from the hearth, sweet with cedar, stinging her eyes. The ink dries slowly in the winter air. Her hands rest, at last, in her lap. Outside, the wind howls low across fields, pulling snowdrifts across the buried hedgerows. The manor stands alone in the white, bones of oak and mortar holding firm against time and tradition. Inside, the petition lies, one name under carefully chosen words. No heralds will trumpet it, no court may heed it, but in the writing, something has shifted. She has claimed her place, not only as a widow, as a woman, as a voice. The servant girl kneels and adds another log to the fire. Sparks leap upward, painting the walls in flashes of orange. She turns to look at the parchment again. Her young mind does not yet grasp the laws that shape the land, but she understands courage when she sees it. And something takes root in her chest, a quiet belief that a woman's words might someday be more than whispers and shadows. The fire crackles. The parchment curls slightly at the edges from the heat, as if a live dot, and somewhere beyond the snow-heavy trees, beyond the halls of judges and lords, the long arm of the Magna Carta stirs not in royal courts, but in the hands of those who refuse to vanish. The law is not fixed. It is carried. And tonight, it is carried by ink, grief, and the will to be seen. The chamber is cold, stone thick and breathless. Deep within the Tower of London, past stairwells slick with centuries, past the hush of torchlit corridors, there is a room few enter without purpose. It holds no throne, no crown, only silence and a chest sealed with time itself. The lid creaks open. A scholar kneels. His robes sweep the floor like old prayers. Hands steady, he reaches into the dark and draws out a scroll bound in fading leather, its edge frayed, its presence almost holy. This is no common parchment. It bears no jewel, no crust of conquest, yet it has shaped kings, broken swords, breathed into fire the word, justice. He unrolls it slowly. The Latin is almost gone, faded to the color of withered leaves, but it breathes. The script curves like branches of a memory not yet dead. The ink may be brown, brittle, thinning at the edges, but the words still speak. To no one will we sell, to no one deny or delay right or justice. His voice barely rises above the torchlight, but the air listens, the stones listen. These walls remember. They remember the cries of the condemned, rising from beneath iron grates. They remember the men who stood accused with no counsel, no witness, no tomorrow. They remember justice as spectacle bleeding, screaming, final. And now, this same tower shelters a scroll that once dared to defy such cruelty. The scholar stares at it in silence. He thinks of the men who knelt in fields to sign it, their seals pressed under threat, their words chained to politics and power. Yet what remains, what survives, is not their ambition. It is the idea that justice must reach down to the low, the unheard, the broken. He rolls the parchment back with reverence, placing it once more inside its chest. His fingers linger a moment too long, as if afraid to let go. Then, with a slow breath, he rises. His boots echo as he walks the long corridor, the sound like distant drums over a battlefield. Each step feels heavier with thought. Outside, the bells of the cathedral begin to ring. The city is awake. Not grand, but moving. Across the square, a child runs barefoot over cobblestones, laughing as she waves a scrap of torn parchment above her head. She says it's a royal letter, that the king will answer her now. Her mother watches from a cart, smiling faintly, unaware that the scroll in her daughter's hands once lined a butcher's tray, useless, torn, forgotten. And yet today, it is a message. Somewhere beyond the Thames, a man sits beneath the eaves of a village hall. His petition was heard. A local reeve, pressured by law, overturned a tax meant only for silence. The man does not know Runnymede. He does not speak Latin, but he knows what it means to be heard. And he knows he was not until now. The Magna Carta does not ride on horseback anymore, it walks. Instead, in small things, in fair trials that open doors, in the quiet expectation that power must answer. And when the scroll is returned to darkness, locked once more beneath ancient stone, it sleeps not as a relic, but as a spark. A spark carried by teachers and jurors, by villagers and children playing at royalty. It is not a monument. It is a whisper passed forward. In the flicker of torchlight, in the rhythm of bells, in the ink that has long since faded, the heart of it still lives. Justice, delayed no more. The king is dead. The bells have long since tolled, and the banners that once bore his crest now fade with the weather. Another wears the crown. Another hand grips the scepter. But deeper than the throne, older than the face of power, something else remains. The charter. In a chamber bathed in morning light, where colors from stained glass saints spill across stone walls, a young scribe bends over parchment. His quill scratches softly, steady and reverent. He is not a knight, not a priest, not a baron raised to command. He is a keeper of ink. The scroll before him bears no blood, no seal of urgency. It is not a desperate plea in a time of war. It is a copy faithful, deliberate, of a charter once born in the fire of rebellion, now reborn in peace. He speaks the words aloud as he writes them. To none will we sell, to none deny or delay, right or justice. His voice is quiet, almost uncertain, but the rhythm begins to steady him, like a prayer not learned, but remembered. He trains his tongue to the shape of each line. This is not for lords. This is for the town of York, for cobblers and weavers, for butchers and millers who will never see the king, but will feel the weight of his rule or its restraint. Outside, life moves with a gentle hum. The market swells with voices. Bakers cry out their wares. Laughter curls through the alleys, and a constable kneels to speak to two angry men, settling their quarrel with a firm word and open hands. No blades are drawn. No gallows loom. Through the glass, the scribe watches them, these ordinary folk with dust on their boots and tiredness in their bones, and sees something rare. Order. Not the kind chained to thrones or enforced by mailed fists, but something slower, quieter. Order shaped not by fear, but by form, by the soft pressure of a rule remembered, a right repeated, not shouted, but expected. He dips his quill again. The ink gleams dark, like memory made liquid. Each stroke is deliberate. Each word is the echo of men long dead, who once stood beneath banners of defiance and demanded more than obedience. They demanded dignity. What was once a revolt has become custom. The charter is no longer a fire, but a hearth. No longer a cry of war, but a rhythm passed down in practice. A magistrate quoting the clause. A child taught fairness at the table. A merchant refuses to be cheated because the law somewhere is still watching. The scribe finishes the last line and lifts his hand. The ink pools slightly, curling at the edge. He breathes deeply, not with pride, but with weight, as if he's helped carry something forward, not just parchment, but promise. The charter has become soil, layered and walked upon, sometimes ignored, sometimes forgotten, but always there, Beneath the feet of those who live by it. He folds the parchment, wax is melted. The seal pressed. Outside, the bells ring again, not for kings, but for time. For noon, for bread, for life to continue. The scribe opens the window. The breeze lifts the scent of wheat, leather, and distant river water. Somewhere, children are pretending to judge one another in a game, and one girl insists on being heard. She shouts, "I have rights," and laughs. The scribe smiles faintly. He does not know what laws will come, what rulers will rise. But for this moment, beneath these saints, with the ink still fresh, he sees the future not in swords, but in sentences. He closes the window gently, and the ink, still drying, gleams like memory passed hand to hand. The moon hangs low, like a watching eye in a sky too quiet. Along the old road, where milestones crumble and grass overtakes forgotten stone, a group of weary pilgrims has gathered. Their journey has halted at the edge of the dark, where the forest begins again and the torchlight falters. They sit close now, pressed together not by warmth, but by the weight of the unknown. Somewhere ahead lies Canterbury. But tonight, it may as well be a continent away. A fire crackles in their midst, fighting back the cold with its flickering glow. Shadows dance across their faces, young and old, hardened and hopeful. And beside that fire, wrapped in a worn cloak and memory, an old knight begins to speak, not loudly, not proudly, but with a voice shaped like gravel in grief. He tells them of kings, of banners soaked in rain, and men who bled for causes they could not name. He speaks of a meadow called Runnymede, where swords once lowered in defiance and words were written that were meant to bind not flesh, but power. He speaks of honor but not glory. As a burden, he recalls the day steel bent to parchment, when men forced a monarch, John of England, to place his seal on something greater than his will, a promise that justice would no longer bow only to the crown. Those rights could be named, protected, defended. And then, with a bitter chuckle, he speaks of what came after, of the king's retreat, of papal bulls that declared the charter void, of soldiers summoned once more to crush the ink that dared to defy command. He speaks not to impress, but to remember, to warn. Across the fire, the younger ones lean in. A carpenter with sawdust still clinging to his cuffs breaks the silence. But if a king can break his promise, then what holds him? The knight says nothing at first. Instead, he reaches for a fresh log, dry, cracked, and lays it upon the fire. The wood groans, sparks lifting into the sky like tiny spirits freed. The flames rise higher. That's what we're still learning. The knight finally murmurs. No one answers, but eyes linger on the embers, on the stars beyond, on the road. Still ahead. The wind picks up, just enough to stir cloaks and stir thoughts. A washerwoman closes her eyes and whispers a prayer, not to saints, but to something older. A vow made by men who believed that no throne, no robe, no blade should place one man above fairness, that the law should hold even kings. The firelight flickers across faces changed by silence. At this moment, they are no longer pilgrims. They are witnesses, carriers of a story older than themselves. A story that doesn't end at a meadow or a seal. One that lives in questions asked in the dark, in the quiet bravery of men and women who dare to expect fairness. The Magna Carta is not in their hands, but it is in the carpenter's question, in the knight's memory, in the firelight passed from one soul to another. Somewhere another torch is being lit. A new journey began, and the road, though dark, is waiting. Rain presses against the roof like a whispering tide. Thin rivulets trail down stained glass, streaking saints in crimson and gold. Outside, the wind carries the wildness of the hills, lashing the monastery walls with branches and fog. The valley below disappears into mist. But inside the scriptorium, there's only the soft scratch of a quill on parchment, and the breath of a boy trying not to shiver. He is small, slight, no older than 12. Ink stains his fingers, his sleeves, the side of his face. His Latin is slow, his English unsure. But his eyes are lit with something the abbot has seen before. Once, long ago, the boy flinches as abbot enters, robes dragging across the cold stone. No rebuke, no greeting, just the creak of old joints and the soft unfolding of a scroll. The abbot places it on the table, reverent. "Understand this," he says simply. The boy stares. The parchment is yellowed, creased, but the ink holds firm. Not a holy writ, not scripture, something else. English barely. He begins to read aloud haltingly. Words stutter on his tongue, foreign and strange. By the will of the barons. Liberties, justice shall not be sold. Then one line stills him. No free man shall be taken or imprisoned. His voice trails off. He looks up. The storm growls beyond the window. But inside, there is stillness. "Free man?" he whispers. Abbot does not answer right away. He simply lowers himself into a wooden chair, joints protesting. His hands rest on the table, pale and veined like ancient bark. Then, after a moment, a tired smile touches his lips. "Read again," he says. Softer now, and the boy does. Again and again, until the rhythm becomes familiar. The words, once awkward, begin to settle into meaning. Not all at once, not fully. But something takes root. What is a free man? Not a question with a clear answer. Not in these hills. Not in a world where lords own the land and children obey without asking why. But still. It lingers. The boy glances. At Abbot, then back to the scroll. His hand traces the edge of the parchment as if it might burn him. It doesn't. The storm outside rages harder. Thunder rolls low through the valley. Rain seeps beneath the window cracks, but in this small stone room, a different kind of weather takes shape, not loud. Not fast. Just a thought. What if the world could be read differently? What if the law was not only for those who wear rings and ride horses? The boy doesn't know yet what he's touching. He doesn't know that this charter, this thing of ink and ambition, was written in rebellion, cursed by kings, and buried in war. He doesn't yet know of fields soaked in blood because of it, or of cities that would rise holding it high like a torch. He only knows this. No free man shall be taken. Somehow he believes it should mean something. Even here, even to him. He folds the scroll gently, as if it were scripture. Abbot says nothing more. He simply watches the boy, as he once watched another years ago kneel in the same spot, asking the same silent questions. Outside, the rain begins to slow. A beam of gray light touches the stone floor like a path just forming. The seed has been planted. In time, it will grow, not into rebellion. Not yet, but into something older and harder to erase. The idea that the world can be questioned, and that even a boy in a monastery, far from power, might one day demand an answer. Sunlight cuts through the high chapel windows like blades of gold, piercing the still air. Dust dances in its glow, falling softly over ancient stone and polished wood. A hush lingers, not sacred, not silent, just respectful. A group of visitors murmurs their way past the exhibit. Shoes echo lightly against worn flagstones. Their voices are low, unsure, as if louder speech might wake something that should not be disturbed. They glance, take photos, then move on toward stained glass saints, old tombs, bronze plaques. But one man stays. He is old, so old his cane is not for posture but for survival. His shoulders curve like a question mark. His steps are slow, uncertain, but determined. He stands before the scroll. It lies beneath the glass, curled slightly at the edges, yellowed and dry, fragile as ash. The ink is faded in places like breath on a mirror. It does not shout anymore. It whispers. The tourists walk on. The man does not move. He looks not at the words, but at what hovers just above them, his own reflection, softened in the glass. Boy once stood where he stands now, barefoot in a coal-stained yard, mud on his knees, listening as his grandfather recited old words in a rough voice. Not from a pulpit, not from power, but from memory. From belief, no free man shall be taken. He hadn't understood it then, not truly. But his grandfather's eyes had shone with something deep and certain. Not hope, exactly. Something harder. Something earned. Justice, the old man had said, comes slowly, but it comes. Now that boy is an old man himself. And the world has changed in ways even kings could never imagine. He blinks, not to see better, but to hold back the fog of age. The scroll before him is dying. Its fibers are weak. Its edges fray like cloth pulled too long. Yet the case around, it hums faintly with controlled air, as if the breath of the world is being kept away. He reaches out. One trembling finger touches the glass lightly, reverently. Still here, he whispers. Not to the parchment, not to himself, but to the idea that refused to die. It had survived fire, kings, wars, silence. It had slept in stone and spoken in the streets. It had been twisted, misused, forgotten, and yet here it was. Not because it was perfect, but because people, generation after generation, had chosen to remember it, to believe in it. Outside, the bells chime the hour slow and deep. A single beam of sun falls directly on the glass, lighting the scroll in gold. The tourists return. Some glance at the man, curious, but they say nothing, and he says nothing more. He turns, walks. Each step echoes a little louder now. Not because the hall has changed, but because something within him has. And behind him, under the glass, the scroll lies still. But the words, though, silent. Wait for the next voice, the next promise. The next question.